What do you say we get back to work on our little sample grill? A couple of weeks ago, we did the corners on this grill. These are half lap corners with upset ends, and I'll link to that video right up over here. But now we need to do something with it. It's just an empty frame, and if you wanted a frame for a mirror or a picture, you could certainly adapt this to this purpose, but I want it to be more of a little ornamental grill. And it's just a sample. I don't have any place it has to go. It doesn't have to fit anything. So that gives me a little bit of freedom in the design and the exact sizes of everything. I don't have to fit some specification for it. But nevertheless, yesterday I made a full-size drawing of it, and this is a pretty rough drawing. It's not perfectly to scale, it's not perfectly symmetrical, and we will do a better job of forging the elements than I've done of drawing them. If you want to be able to draw stuff like this accurately, you just need to draw more, and certainly, I need to spend more time with a sketch pad in my hand. But nevertheless, we have our full-size drawing, and what we have here are 4 C scrolls, and I'm going to put some little center elements. This one I drew a little bit too long. I think I like the shorter ones better. And this will all go together. It forms a quadrafoil of sorts. It's not the classic forge-welded quadrafoil. It's 8 different elements that are going to form this. So before we do anything else, we need to figure out how much material do we need for our scrolls. And that's really pretty simple if you have a full-size drawing. All you need is a piece of string, and you start this on one end, and you run it along the center line of your drawing. And it's okay if it flattens out after you've gone somewhere, just keep it pinned down with your finger here. Some people use a copper wire for this, but sometimes they don't behave quite as well. They kink and spring around. So a string or shoelace, something like that, works just fine. So don't lose track of where this is. And then measure this. And I end up with 14 3/4 inches. If it's a hair long, it won't be a big deal, so I'm going to just round that up to 15 inches. Now, at 15-inch long scrolls, that's my finished length. After I do anything else to it that I'm going to do before bending the scroll, I want it at 15 inches. And all I'm going to do to these scrolls is taper these ends out. I think I want those tapers to be about 3 inches long. A flat taper typically stretches about double its length. That means to get a 3-inch taper, I need to start 1.5 inches shorter than I would, and that's 1.5 inches shorter on each end because I'm going to taper each end. So I need 12 inches of material to do those scrolls. And that's something like 300 millimeters, but it really doesn't matter that much. You have to make your own drawing for your own project and measure it and make these the size you need. So my sizes are just for this. Don't copy my sizes. Do your own drawing. Get your own measurements. I'm going to use 1/4 inch by 1/2 inch material. So what is that? About 6 by 13 millimeter. Again, make it fit your project. But because the frame is 1/2 inch, this is the same width, and that'll make it easier to collar. And collaring we'll probably do in a third video. So I think I want to cut these 12 inches. And that's an important thing to consider. Just because you've done the math and you're pretty sure what you're going to need, do a test piece first. Luckily, at 12 inches, I have a little bit more material here than I need to do a test piece and my 4 scrolls, but it's the only piece 1/4 by 1/2 I have on the rack, so I can't afford to screw it up more than one time. So I'll cut 12 inches off, do one test piece. If it's exact, I'll cut the rest 12 inches. If it's a little long, a little short, I've got enough material to make that adjustment. So I have a simple test scroll done here. Now don't worry, we will look at forging these entirely once we get to the real scrolls. I just wanted to get the test done, see if my sizes are correct, and see if what I'm working on looks like it's going to fit. And this definitely fits the drawing. I think it's fine as far as that goes. The biggest issue with this is that these are not symmetrical. They're not perfectly the same on each side. So what that means in the long run is that I pick which side I want, and I go with that, and I use it for a pattern for all my other scrolls. Now this isn't a scroll form. I'm not going to bend the other scrolls around this, because then they would be larger than this by the thickness of the material. But I will use this as a pattern, and I want this side, I like it better. So that's what I'm going to go with. And I know that cutting it 12 inches, drawing it out to 15 inches is going to work just fine. So I'm going to cut the rest of my material. I'll meet you back over there at the anvil, and we'll get these done. Now I want these to stretch 1.5 inches on each end. Not 2 inches on one end and only 1 inch on the other end. So keep this symmetrical. If you start at the tip and work your way back, it's real easy to kind of sneak up on your measurement. This is such a short draw, I'm just going to do it at the face of the anvil instead of going to the horn. And then to check, I've got a hook rule that I've marked at 13.5 and 15 inches. So those are my two measurements. I can see I'm not quite where I want to be, so I need to keep going. I want this to be parallel in width. I don't want it to bulge out, so I'll keep bringing it back in width there. Back to my hook rule. Very close. Perhaps one more heat. Taking the time to draw this out instead of leaving a square-ended scroll really makes a difference in the quality of your work. So that's pretty much right there. I still need to bevel the edge a little bit. This bevel is just for aesthetic value. I just like to break the sharp corners. Okay, that's right on my mark there. So now what I'm going to do is do the same thing to all of the bars, make them all the same length at this step. Then we'll turn them around and do the same thing to the other end. So we've got our 15 inch with a taper on each end. Be all 4 of them done both ends. Keep in mind as you check your measurement the final time that steel stretches when it's hot, it expands. And on something this long, it's probably about 1/8 of an inch longer at red heat than it will be when it's completely cool. So So you have to kind of make a judgment call on if it needs to be a little longer at this stage. And the more critical the pieces are, the more important it is to check them all after they cool down to make sure they're all still the right length, and also the longer. If you're working a big stair rail or something, it could stretch a ½ an inch or more at heat. I have 4 of these with the same length and the same degree of taper. I'm happy with the way these look. Now I need to make them look like this, or I should say I need to make them look like this end. I don't like this end because it's got kind of a kink there. This is too flat there. This one I like, so as I do each one of these, I compare them with this end, do the other end, compare it with that end, and get this much at least correct at the anvil. Then this part, this gentle curve here, is quite easy to bend with bending forks at the vise after it's cold, and you can kind of tweak them and adjust them cold to make sure they just fit. Now you could certainly bend these around a scroll form, but for this little project there's only 8 of them, and this is a great opportunity to practice skills and just get better at bending scrolls. I don't do a lot of scrolls, so it certainly doesn't hurt me to spend some time practicing that. If I was making a big gate that had dozens of these square panels with more dozens of scrolls and more ends, there might be 200 of these ends that I had to do, and I'd want them all to look the same, then I would build a scroll form. But for this, I just don't think I need one. Now scrolls want to bend where they're thin or where they're hot, so keep the heat right where you want it. And as you start to bend that up, take time to compare it to your first scroll. I can see that that's not bad. I want to bend it back here a little bit. It's starting to get a little cold. I'll just start establishing that. Because they'll bend when they're thin, because scrolls will bend in the thin spots, that's why you want to make sure you have a nice even taper. So that's pretty good right there. I want to keep bending from there out. For larger scrolls, you might want to use the horn, but for these small ones, I think it's actually easier to just bend them over the edge of the anvil. As you turn the scroll, you got to keep repositioning your master here. So that's not bad. I think from this point on, I'd rather bend that cold with bending forks. It'll be much more precise. So I'll turn that around, I'll do the other end. Now by the time you've done all 8 of these, they're going to get a little bit easier. You'll start developing a feel for what you got to do with them. I try to advance the scroll just a little bit as I work it and tip my hammer a little bit so I'm not hitting in the exact same spot every time. If you do that, you'll end up with flat spots. So that's pretty close to being the same on each end. Like I say, doing it cold from this point is an easy way to make these little adjustments, but it's really hard to get back to the middle. So make sure your middle is what you want at this stage. So now do this to all 4 scrolls, get both ends of all of them. That'll be 8 ends total. You may have noticed that one of the ends gave me a little bit of trouble, and that's because it had a little bit of a thin spot, and it wanted to bend at the thin spot, which wasn't necessarily where I wanted it to bend. But with some perseverance, you can get over that. So that's all 8 ends done. I'm going to let those cool, and then we'll go over to the other bench and finish that up. And I may, while I'm waiting for these to cool, go ahead and do the other end of this one and make it look right so that they're all the same. So to do this, we'll use a pair of bending forks. So one fork goes in the vise. The other one is a handheld fork. And by using these, we can make very controlled bends on this. Typically, it's better if they both point the same direction. If you do this, you tend to twist the scroll a little bit. So if you use one up and one down, you're frequently better off. And just take little increments and keep comparing that to your test scroll, which is now much better off on both ends because I've done a little correction on it as well. And this will give me 5 scrolls I can choose from. So if there's one that just doesn't look quite right, I will discard it and go to the others. This is really all it takes. And with big enough bending forks, you can really bend pretty big stuff cold like this. And it's a lot easier sometimes because you can hand hold it, you can look at it this way and that way and figure out what needs to happen. And your life is frequently a little easier if you're not doing this hot. The work is much bigger though. But doing even 3/8 by 1 with big enough pair of bending forks, I don't think you'd have much trouble. Okay, I just made that one a little tighter than my original. Bending forks can allow you to open that up just a little bit. And as we assemble this, we may find it needs a little bit more adjustment here or there just to get everything to go together just right. While you do this, look for little kinks or flat spots and try to deal with all those and try and keep it in the same plane. This is a little off, so I'll have to put it in the vise and bend it a little bit. But not a big deal at this stage of the game. Now, when I came to the shop this morning at 8 o'clock, I really thought I would have time to do these other little elements that are going to go between the scrolls on this grill project. But unfortunately, as so often happens, I had about 6 hours of distractions between then and now, and it's late afternoon now, and I just don't think I'm going to get those done today. So we'll pick those up as another video. But we do have all of our scrolls nearly done. There's always a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of adjusting to do at the very end. And keep in mind that these are going to have a little 1/4 inch space in between them for these other elements to go into. But in general, that's the idea of what we're going for. And it's just a matter of making the other pieces and coloring it all together. So we'll pick that up in the next video in this series. Now, scrolls are one of the things in blacksmithing that I probably struggle with the most. It's a little bit more fluid, a little bit more artistic, and since most of my work is a little bit more practical, sometimes these fluid lines are a little bit tougher. So working on a project like this is a great way to practice this. It's a great way to refine skills, and I hope to do a lot more stuff like this in the future, so that I can improve my skills as we continue our journey in the art and the craft of blacksmithing. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop. Be safe. Wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.